Welcome to Breaking Banks.
Hi, I'm your host, Amber Buker, and today I got the chance to speak with one incredible human, Ken Denman. Ken is a partner at Sway Ventures and a member of several corporate boards, including Costco Wholesale, Motorola, and VMware. Before that, Ken was a seasoned and successful CEO, leading several companies through turnarounds, IPOs, and acquisitions, including the sale of Emotion, a leader in cloud-based facial expression analytics, which he sold to Apple. So turn up this wide-ranging conversation where Ken and I discuss leading through crashes, navigating today's very tricky fundraising landscape, the promise of the metaverse, and so much more. Hello, it is so great to be here today recording an episode of Breaking Banks with Ken Denman. We were connected by some mutual acquaintances at Money 2020, and I'm so excited to talk to him today. Ken is the board member and general partner at Sway VC. Ken, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Hi, Amber. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So you have had an incredible career, as we talked about in the introduction to this segment. But it was so funny because when I was prepping for our conversation, I looked back at your LinkedIn and the earliest job title I could find was COO. I was laughing. I was like, that's a pretty high level title to be starting at, but I'm sure that LinkedIn just doesn't have enough space for everything that you've done. I'd love to start, if you don't mind, by kind of going back a little bit further and looking at the gap between, where you grew up, where you went to school, and then how you made it to that high of a rung on the ladder. And what attributes kind of do you think helped you get to where you are today?
Well, I broadly, I was an Army brat, oldest of five boys, and our dad was a sergeant in the Army, and so we moved around a lot, and I think that ultimately, a couple of stints in Germany, 2 different tours, and then sort of posts all over the United States, finally ending up in the Fort Lewis area, which is in the Seattle-Tacoma area, allowed me and my brothers to kind of learn how to assimilate quickly, and so it also fed intellectual curiosity, seeing a lot of different cultures, a lot of different people, a lot of different parts of the country and the world. So that was very helpful. I ended up majoring in accounting and getting an accounting degree, passing the CPA exam. But my first job was not with a public company, with not public accounting companies, but was with Battelle, Pacific Northwest Laboratories, which was a division of Battelle Memorial Institute, a contract research and development company. And that was by far the best offer. And my dad was pretty clear, like, hey, you need a good job and you need a job that pays well. So anyway, what that led to, though, was, it fed my love for sci-fi and what's possible, and media, spending time with the researchers and the technology, was the beginning of feeding my lifelong love for, looking around corners. And after that, I got my MBA at the University of Washington in finance and international business. And so, I came into the working world pretty much with more of a financial and accounting background, but quickly, via moving into US West in the investor relations area, I jumped to several promotions, but I ended up, as in the investor relations area at headquarters here in Denver with US West. Again, and one of my assignments, in the late 80s, early 90s was in mobile, was in wireless. And you got to remember, back in that day, cellular was brand new. And I remember telling someone,
remind us what year we were in.
This is like 88 through 92 or so, where I'm telling my friends that, hey, in the future, your phone, you'll just have a phone number that goes with you everywhere. Now, back in those days, people were like, whoa, no. But long story short, I rose up through the finance area, and then I became sort of an opportunity to be assistant to the assistant to the president and CEO of US West Communications. So I had this lofty title, executive director and assistant to the president and CEO, and it was a great staff job. I was clearly on a good, fast path. But I remember the CEO telling me, hey, look, you've got a great title, and a lot of people are going to know you and see you, but you have to remember, you don't have any power. I have all the power. and so all of the people on my staff that you're going to have to work with and say no to on my behalf are people you're going to have to work with in the future. So be very humble. And it was great advice, and I was, and I think I would have been anyway, but it was particularly good advice, and it allowed me to learn how to build relationships and to navigate, senior level officers and senior level issues. And so from there, I became a vice president of the wholesale wireless unit of US West. Got to meet great people who are friends today, including, people like John Stanton, who was at the time CEO of Western Wireless, and before that McCaw, and who now is on the board with me at Costco, and is the president of the Seattle Mariners. So I've had good fortune through most of my career to be in interesting places, interesting jobs, meet interesting people who today are still friends of mine. I ultimately went to Europe as chief operating officer wireless for Media One, where I was leading the building of multinational joint ventures, basically building GSM companies, cellular companies in Central and Eastern Europe. Really interesting places based in London, St. Petersburg, Lithuania, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, Hungary, chasing licenses in Ukraine, Romania, Egypt. Really a great job. And, so that brings us up to the point that my LinkedIn starts.
Well, no shortage of amazing stories jam-packed in that amount of time. I love so many themes that you talked about, in leadership, Ken, but also this love of looking around corners and being kind of on the cutting edge, being in mobile before mobile was what it is today. By the way, I remember the first time that I got to keep my cell phone number, and I was so ecstatic. I remember exactly where I was. I was like, whoa, you mean just because I'm moving from Cricket to AT&T, I'll never have to do it ever again? Amazing. Thank you for taking us along that journey. And so we're up to COO. After that, you founded a startup. So you also have a background as an entrepreneur, which I'm sure comes in so handy in your work today as an investor and general partner with Sway. So the thing about this startup, though, I love that you're so candid about it. You described this company on your LinkedIn as a precursor and too early leader of cloud-based unified communication space. So what is that experience as a too early founder teach you that you still use today?
Yeah. Well, one of the things it taught me for sure was that, in venture, timing is the Megillah. Timing is everything at some level. If there's one thing that can crush you or benefit you, it's timing. So I had joined Crosspoint Venture Partners as an entrepreneur in residence. Great team there. My buddy, a lifelong friend to this day, Seth Nyman, was the general partner that recruited me there, and we had a great idea together. He asked me to write it up. I pitched it at a partner meeting and asked for 10 million. And by the time I got out of the room, I had $15 million to start this fund, to start this company. And we were doing well. We were meeting our plan. We had a really impressive number of customers and more in the pipeline. And we were basically an early version of 8x8 or Ring Central, but it was more voice over ATM as opposed to voice over IP because the technology just wasn't there. We were early, but again, still making progress. There was a market there. There was signal that was clear. Well, then the first big the internet bubble, the first internet bubble of 99 2000, 2000 hit, and I could not raise another round for love nor money. And even with Crosspoint backing us fully, it was just a dark time, as most of you will remember. And so, even though we had done well relative to the plan that we put forward, at some point I realized that if I hit the wall at 10,000 miles an hour, we were basically the front door to a lot of companies, and we would not only, we would hurt a lot of our customers. So at some point, realizing how difficult it was, frankly impossible for a telecom service provider to raise a round in that window, with about $1.5 million dollars, I chatted with Crosspoint with Seth and just said, look, this could end very badly if we are not thoughtful here. And so we decided to wind the company down. Crosspoint was very, very honorable in that decision process and support of that. And so, we severanced a lot of employees, and the management team went on no salary, and we spent many months just moving customers to other solutions. And then, I put a padlock on the building door. It gave the landlord the keys and took a family on a Disney cruise. But it was a really, really difficult emotional time, and there was nothing harder than standing in front of employees and saying we were going to wind the company down. It was one of the most deeply emotional times in my life. And I remember talking to Seth and saying, gosh, Seth, I don't know how to let this happen. I'm devastated. I can't believe that this is where this ended up, and everybody worked so hard. And Seth was like, Ken, get over yourself. He said, Cisco's trading at $11. This is way bigger than you. This is not about you. This is, there are things that are bigger forces at nature, and you got to understand that if you're going to learn from this experience and move on to the next one. And so I had the benefit in that particular time of a great friend, coach, and investor who had lost a lot of money, and was really kind of reading me the riot act about not capturing the real lesson here. And by the way, that same investor, along with Excel, pulled me into the next company, to replace that team. And that was a team a business that was troubled, but we took public like 2.5 years later after I took over.
Thank you, Ken, for being so vulnerable and sharing that story. It's one that I think is on a lot of people's minds, given the climate around fintech investing right now and what we're seeing. People are just being told, like, listen, you're not going to be able to raise a round. And a lot of that is because of everything that's going on with crypto, and there was a fintech decline before that. I'm curious, from your position and having your background in an experience like this where timing is literally everything, what advice would you give to founders, companies that you're talking to these days?
I would say, first and foremost, do everything you can to create as much runway as you can. We're in a wind tunnel here that's pretty tough and hard, and to the extent that you have to raise capital, understand that the market is extremely tough. Valuations I've seen cut as much as 60% in the best case, and so sometimes you just take the pain. If you can raise around and buy yourself more runway, do it. But if you can extend your reach, do it. I mean, 24 months of runway is the new, is the new 12 months of runway. And so, we just don't know how long this wind tunnel is. And VCs are being very, very, very conservative. And so lots of folks are talking, taking meetings, but there's alligator arms out there. They're trying to understand, when the windows for IPOs will open. They're trying to understand what's happening in capital flows. Even though they have capital dry powder, it's just a nervous time. So deals are being done very carefully, if at all. So again, I come back to my beginning thesis here: buy yourself as much runway as possible, and in the worst case, take the pain and give yourself a chance for victory later.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken. And you heard it here first, people. 24 months is the new 12 months of runway. So let's talk about something that is a little bit more bright, which is you are a turnaround artist. You take rough situations and make them better and save companies. You mentioned iPass a second. Well, I don't know if you mentioned it by name. So your 2003 IPO with iPass, and before that, OpenWave also did a major strategy transition with them in the mobile space. So can you tell us a little bit about those journeys and what makes you the turnaround artist, I guess, and what skills do you think are the most helpful for that?
Well, I don't know if I would actually accept the turnaround artist. I've been involved in a couple of situations like that, and one went really well in terms of at least getting to an exit and an IPO in a very difficult time when there weren't many IPOs in 2003. The other was more of a company that was kind of deeply harmed, deeply damaged by a nasty, hostile takeover attempt. which the company survived, but it was almost, kind of mortally wounded at that point. And the job then was to kind of right the ship and sort of figure out which way is up and what the real underlying assets and value was. And we organized it around IP and the two operating units, which eventually were parted out to private equity. And so, I don't know that I would consider that as much as a turnaround, as much as sort of a diving catch, if you will, to kind of extract as much value as possible. But the core of any of those situations when you're going into a turnaround is to really, you've got to first right the ship, which means bond with the employees, listen really, really well, and then figure out what you have to do to keep the team intact, and sort of very quickly develop the strategy for the go forward, and build that strategy with the team, sell it to the board, and get to work. And I'm accelerating greatly the time frame and the amount of work to be done, but the main job in difficult situation is to provide the leadership and the prioritization of effort that's needed to figure out the North Star, and then sell that North Star internally and externally, while sort of watching the unit economics very carefully, and also importantly, if it comes to it, picking the right point to take the exit, and if that means if it's M&A or if it's selling the company or whatever it is, being eyes wide open around what the future holds and what's the best strategy for all concerned shareholders, employees, customers.
No small list of things to do, for sure, and to do really well, and probably on a razor's edge of margin error, right? You said something in there about
you're managing a lot of anxiety, typically anxiety across the board, all the constituents, and anxiety within your own self. And so figuring out a way to sort of suppress that anxiety to get to the real work that needs to be done. I think a lot of times in difficult situations, there's so much anxiety that there's actually too many points of focus, and your real goal is to get to just a couple of points of focus and go attack those. And trying to do too many things in a hurricane is like the worst thing you can do.
I'm glad that you elaborated on that, because it actually ties right back into what I was going to point out about something that you said, which was figure out your North Star and then sell it. First, you're speaking to this anxiety, creating a lot of distraction. Figuring out the North Star is the really difficult first part. I want to ask about the second part, though, the selling it part. What do you think are some of the key traits that make good leaders capable of selling, this is what we need to do, or this is what the vision is, and getting that buy-in that you need to make things happen?
I think one of the key traits is that you have to be a willing and able learner. You have to go into a situation, listen really well, ask great questions, and then coalesce around just a few points of emphasis. And I think that great leaders tend to be great translators of sort of understand, sort of take in, ingest a lot of data and information, coalesce around a sort of a core set of principles and decisions, and then play those back in a way that people are not surprised, because they've sort of participated already in building them, through the whole question answer debate conversation, and at that point, many people, both internally and at the board level, they kind of get to the point where it's like, they think it's actually their decision. They think it's their plan, and it is, because they've sort of participated in it. And yeah, there's always some hard calls that a CEO or a leader has to make that may be orthogonal to what people thought. But more often than not, if you do it right, you do it well, you do it relatively fast, the obvious answers kind of come to the surface. It's usually not non-obvious answers. It's more obvious answers, and you just sort of focus the effort, and people get to the point where they kind of go, "Yep, that makes sense. Absolutely. Wish we thought of this, a year ago," or "Yep, that's what I've been saying all along." However they get there, you just want them to get there.
Got it. And I'm sure that happens a lot. People feel heard sometimes when those calls are finally made. Speaking of making big calls that CEOs and founders have to make, you also had a company acquired by Apple, Emotion, which I think was doing automated facial, expression analysis. Can you tell us a little bit about that company and that journey and the, what that experience of acquisition and wrestling with those big strategic decisions was like in the moment, maybe?
Well, I would say, first of all, the company was Emotion. That was the name of the kind of how we pronounced it.
Emotion.
That's okay.
Thank
you.
Yeah,
it's a combination of emotion and quotient. Emotion, and
okay.
This was a company that was actually myself and my co-investor, the lead investor, was my friend, my former from Crosspoint Venture days. Seth Nyman was the lead investor in that deal, and we had a lot of conversations about what was next, what was the next big thing, and generally, the thesis was, since the beginning of the machine age, people have adapted to machines and the proclivities of machine designers, and over several tequilas, we began going down this thread. Well, like, maybe it's time now, with the enabling technology, or because of the enabling technology, that machines could actually adapt to us. Well, if they were going to do that, how would they do that? Well, they'd have to know how we feel in order to serve us. And so that led to a conversation. Okay, how would that happen? What would be the enabling technologies that could allow that? And what would be the sensor, and what would be the signal? And between that, with cameras being everywhere and the resolution of cameras being so great, it was clear that computer vision would be a component. It was also, we also thought that it could be the face, because if you learn how the facial expressions work with the limbic system, when we feel a stimulus, or when we are impacted by a stimulus, there are the muscles of the face are impacted, whether we know it or not. And people talk about a poker face. To a lesser extent, the human eye can see changes in faces, but not as well, nowhere near as well as the computer vision capability that we have today. Cameras today, at a 1080p by 1080p perspective, if you go to a pixel level, if you're interrogating a face at a pixel level, you can see things that the human eye can't see. So to the extent that someone feels an expression, or has an emotion, and I will say has some sense or some reaction, there are muscle movements in the face that the human eye cannot see, and the camera can see. So based on the facial action coding system that a famous scientist has developed, we knew that there was a potential there. So we found a team, an intact team at the University of California, San Diego, that was the most cited, most published team in the world on this sort of facial expression measurement area. And we're able to pull that team out of the university. We funded the company. I did the deal with the University of California, San Diego, for the prior art, and we went down the path. And we had a lot of great use cases, but ultimately there were large companies with billions of devices in the market that had phones in it, and they had a better idea. So long story short, we ended up being acquired by Apple. That's probably as much as I can say. As you know, Apple's
understood. I had to ask.
Pretty aggressive about privacy, and so I'm gonna stop there. It was a good outcome, and and we were the team was really happy to be associated with such an amazing brand and an amazing company. I had told the team, if they came with us and did this, that we would help them productize their life's work. And there's no better product company in the world. And so, it was a good outcome.
That's incredible. And it all started with a conversation with a friend, a really deep, amazing conversation with a friend that you had known again from a past life, which I think
Yeah,
is
for
the
me.
theme for what we've talked about today too. A lot of things you said, and then I knew this from this guy from there, and we did this
Yeah.
together. That's just how it kind of unfolds, isn't it?
For I've had a lot of lives, and I've been fortunate, and I would tell you that relationships are ultimately the thing that determines the success or lack thereof for most of us across careers. The most important things in our lives are typically the relationships, both personal and in business. And so earning the trust and the confidence of people that you care for in either personal or business is sort of the key, one of the major keys to success in my view.
So I'm curious, with all of the work that you were doing at Emotion, if you have any strong opinions on AR, VR, the metaverse, all of those things that rely on trying to understand and replicate very complex human individuals and emotions and situations.
Generally, I would say the most important thing that I have observed is we often, in a lot of technologies, the first place they're tried are more in sort of personal consumer areas. And absolutely, gaming is like one of the biggest markets in the world, bigger than a lot of the content markets and media and advertising and movies, theaters. It's an amazing market, but it's not often the first place to go with enabling technology, the next versions. I think that where we will see quote unquote meta have success first is going to be more in use cases that enterprises embrace. So whether it's training for precision instrumentation or some specific area where people have an opportunity to be better trained in a more of a virtual setting, something like that. Using digital twin technology to solve problems or use cases that are more enterprise related. Absolutely, I can see that. I happen to be a co-founder and chairman of the board of an interesting company that was pre-Sway, Proprio Vision, which is a Seattle-based company, and I call it virtual reality for surgeons, for lack of a better term. But where the use cases, you're solving a hard problem and delivering value down an enterprise lane, we'll see success there. And over time, there'll be an opportunity for more of the consumer-facing areas. But I think the willingness to pay is evident in the enterprise space, where you solve current hard problems and deliver more efficiency, less latency, more capability, and particularly where you can augment humans. I think we sometimes miss that opportunity where there's still a human in the loop, but you can dramatically augment humans and improve efficiency.
Bold vision for the future. I think it's really interesting, the medical applications that we have, not just from AR, VR, meta, but also robotics. And the combination of those is really exciting.
Yeah. Well, just to tag onto that point, what we used to think a lot of these technologies as sort of individual siloed technologies, whether it's natural language processing, computer vision, machine learning, deep learning, et cetera. You could go on and on, AR, VR. The reality is a lot of these technologies now are mature enough where they're coming together, and they're coming together quickly, and there's not as much sort of separation between them, and there's now enough expertise where people can use them simultaneously to solve hard rock problems. And so it's one of the reasons I remain absolutely optimistic and excited about what's going to happen in the next 5 years. I think we're going to see so many cool things come to fruition.
It's always the hard problems that are the most exciting, I think. And you also invest in an area that has a ton of other hard problems that we talk about a lot on this show, which is finance and fintech. I saw that you had participated in an investment for Tally, which I don't know if you guys have seen their commercial where the girl's laying in bed and it talks about what it feels like to be in credit card debt. I love that commercial. It was so emotion, let's say. Um, but that was a really cool investment with folks like Cowboy Ventures, Andreessen Horowitz, Rex over at Cambrian, who's a friend of the show. What do you love about finance and fintech? What are you most excited about in that space right now?
Well, broadly, my interest in fintech comes from just looking at which industries will be most disrupted in the next 5 to 7 years, and financial services is absolutely one of those. It also comes from my background in mobile and mobile software, because we kind of really are carrying banks around in our hand. These things are the equivalent of the go forward sort of expression of banking, and a lot happens. With a lot of power in our hands. And so, I started thinking a lot about the fintech space in the late aughts, and combine that with some changes in legislation through the Durbin Act, as an example, that really, I think, was an accelerant to early stage companies being able to get in the game, being able to sort of get lease a banking charter. And so I have had, for more than a decade now, an interest in where things were going to go in the financial services space. So, the opportunity here is that, I have a saying, money wants to move at the speed of data, and largely it has not been allowed to, for a number of reasons. Many are related to sort of regulatory constraints, but also just not actually having the ability to put power in the hands of consumers. So, I just think there's so much opportunity, because the reality is that the average consumer is like a frog in a boiling water. They have no idea really of the environment that they're working in. Many of us, we have financial advisors who are working to manage our finances and save money and get optimal returns. The average consumer doesn't have that, and unfortunately, a lot of the financial services, there's little or no education for them. So I think that commercial was perfect, because what Jason Brown and the team was able to do, in addition to being an amazing sort of deep technology company under the covers, their machine learning, heading the deep learning capability to do underwriting, is unbelievably strong and good and deeply technical. But at the point of contact with the consumer, what they've been able to do is speak to a truth for the average consumer, which is, they don't really understand finance. They kind of have a sense that they're in trouble, but they don't really know how to solve it. And even more so, there's a lot of anxiety out in the market broadly, and that the woman laying awake thinking about, okay, I've got like 4 credit cards, I got this much debt, I got to make this payment on this date, I'm shuffling around. We are suffering from a mental health crisis in many ways across the country, and consumers, much of their mental health challenges is around financial stress in the everyday family. So finding a way to use technology to help provide a support, advice, really to actually step in and take control and take that weight off the shoulders of the consumer and add value. I mean, it's easy to say, we can step in and be your advisor, but are you really adding value? Are you really helping? Can you demonstrate that you're helping people reduce their credit card debt and improve their livelihood, and improve their sort of anxiety? That's what Tally is attacking, and it's a beautiful mission. It's a powerful mission. It's a noble mission. But the reality of value, actually, you can saying it is one thing. I'm a huge fan of sort of membership models. The fact that they're 48-month, 60-month cohort retentions is so high speaks to they're actually delivering value, and actually are reducing the amount of debt that consumers are under, reducing the period of time which they can pay off debt, and frankly, reducing the financial stress that consumers feel. So it's one of the reasons I'm so excited to be involved with Tally, because they're really adding value. They're doing good by doing good. It's a powerful thought.
Very powerful indeed. And Ken, you've just done so much good through all of your work. and now investing in amazing companies. So tell us, is there anything that we should have asked you that didn't? And where can people find you? What would you like us to take away from today?
Well, you covered the waterfront pretty well. I think that we're in an interesting time in this down trough economically, sort of in the country and the world right now. But I would say this: so many great companies have been built in downturns, and part of the reason is I think it's because, unlike maybe the last 3 or 4 years, where capital was so abundant and kind of easy. When capital is constrained, you have to be really, really good and really, really focused. And I think I think there are going to be some great companies built in this window at a time when in the next 5 to 7 years, we're going to see more disruption, more benefit, more change to the good around capability, technology, underlying enabling technology, transforming itself into better B2B models, better B2C models, better B2B2C models. We're not going to recognize where we are today 5 to 7 years from now, because it's going to be such big change. So I'm excited about the opportunity to find great companies, who are looking at some of the hard problems in front of us with a clean sheet of paper. I'm excited to see large enterprise companies working harder to understand how do they get access to the data, the information, the perspective on what's being built around them, because many big companies are now figuring out that they're not the best innovators. And so we're starting to see them leveraging relationships with the venture community. Some are still trying to do corporate venture, but a lot of the folks are doing sort of outsourced venture capital because, again, they're trying to stay in their lane. So I see great trends, and I'm optimistic about where things are going, even in this sort of economic dark times.
Ken, I feel like I just got the most uplifting masterclass ever. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate your time and wish you all the best in the holidays coming up.
Thank you, Amber. It was a pleasure to be here, and likewise, I wish you a great holiday season.
Thanks, Ken.
That's it for this week. If you like the show, make sure to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, or share it with a friend, or share it on social media.
We'll see you again next week with more Breaking Banks.